Hello everyone, we're back. John Lustria, Education Coordinator at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, joined by Ranger Jeff here, and we're at Harpers Ferry National Historical Park today, bringing you a day of exciting sites of medical interest. Here we're out on tour, and this is the first of many programs like these we're going to do over the course of the year. Hope you enjoyed Stop 1. If you missed Stop 1, you can, keep watching us as we're doing this live, but after the program's over, you can go back and watch Stop 1 to see all the exciting information we talked about regarding John Brown, medical legacy of John Brown, and all kinds of interesting things there. We're continuing with Stop 2. We'll get to why we're here in just a second. We've moved forward a few years in time. We're now in the Civil War, and actually, I forgot myself here. Before we get too far in, just want to make sure you like the video, you subscribe to our YouTube channel, so that way you'll be alerted when we go live for the future stops we have over the course of the rest of the day. So make sure you like the video, subscribe, share it, tell your friends about it, send it to your friends, and if you want to go that extra step, become a member of the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. For as low as $25 a year, you support programming like this. But now we're actually talking about the Civil War, and specifically, we're talking about a contraband camp, which was located in Harpers Ferry. Now, contraband is a term that gets applied to escaped enslaved peoples, and if you want to learn more about it, I did an interview with historian Chandra Manning earlier this year, where it's a great conversation about contraband camps across the country. It's a really great interview. I'd highly recommend it. But basically, enslaved people, as far as the Confederacy is concerned, of course, are thought of as property. And so there's a Union general in 1861, Benjamin Butler, who's really a lawyer by trade, and he kind of uses a legal argument he dubs them contraband of war, so they don't have to be returned to the Confederacy. And so that puts them in a kind of weird legal gray area. And so they stick with the Union Army because they're the ones that can physically protect them. They make themselves useful. There's all kinds of things that go into that, but there are these little camps that pop up. And one of those such camps pops up at Harpers Ferry. There's some well-known photographs. Got some here. And this is taken, it is raining outside right now, but this is taken just to my left, your right, about, 200 yards, 300 yards.
Yeah, at the most. It's pretty close.
And this is another photograph. You can actually see where we are in this picture. We are right there on this porch. It's kind of hard to see, I'm sure, through the lens there, but that's exactly where we're standing. And those other buildings you see over there are what you can see kind of off in the background over there. So these sort of ramshackle tents and things are the living conditions, and we're going to talk about what conditions were like in camps like these. Now, Jeff,
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about, why this camp was here, about how many people were living here, and things of that nature, and when it was here.
When you're looking at a lot of the pictures of Harpers Ferry, a lot were taken in the summer and the fall of 1862. And a lot of folks were able to escape the farms and the areas to the east and to the south, the plantations, the houses, and they were able to come here. They were able to self-liberate. And they ended up around the Army camps. Some got jobs. They worked for the Quartermaster Corps. Others helped out at hospitals. We're going to talk about that a little bit too. And they were able to find ways to get into the North and to get better opportunities. The problem is you hit upon it, there was a legal issue. By declaring them contraband, it sounds bad today, but actually Butler and others were able to say, we are going to free you and we're going to take you away, and we are not required to return you. And this is before the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation. And so this was a window or an opportunity for people to get away. And a place like Harpers Ferry, there's railheads, there's canals, there's jobs, There's medical care as it was. And of course, you could always find some opportunity. It's better than being where you were. If you were further south, you were hard worked. If you went over to Richmond, you might be rented out to people building fortifications. I mean, there's all kinds of bad things that could happen in a time of war. So you could come here and you had a way to get out and you had opportunity. Now, it brings us to some questions. We don't have totals on how many people were here. There's a newspaper account that said August 1862. One newspaper reporter estimated there were around 200 to 400 people that had self-liberated to Harpers Ferry. But accounts by the attack in 1862 by Stonewall Jackson on the town, where he encircled Harpers Ferry and fired down on the town and various military positions, accounts from that time period talk about 400, 1,200, and even 2,000. So that's a lot of people. And of course, if they were captured, that'd make it one of the larger recaptures of escaped people that we know about during the Civil War. I don't know what the largest would be, but that would be certainly one of the bigger ones. You ask about the number. There is a little factoid that's sort of been hiding in plain sight all these years. The Confederate officers, when they captured the town on September 15, 1862, as part of the housekeeping of the capture, they had to feed everybody that was here. And when you look at the rations requested, the person in charge of this was a chaplain in one of the Louisiana units. You quickly realize that we know how many people were captured in the town. It was over 12,000. But he asked for more than that. He asked for over 2,000 more than that. And so we do know the population was 1 to 300 in the town at that time. So it may indicate that there could have been as many as 2,000 people that had self-emancipated from this surrounding area into this point here, or had followed retreating Union soldiers or railroad tracks into this point. It could be a very large number of people. And the images that you just showed, that could just be one portion of a much larger camp. And so we know that for 1862. Now, if you fast forward, we're not too good with 1863 information. It just hasn't come to the surface yet. We do know there was, by late 1863, there was a religiously based school here, and formerly enslaved people could go there. And it was, of course, more or less a Bible school. And so there is evidence of some support structure for people coming in. But in 1864, the Army made this a major base. And that's where things get interesting. They sent an Army officer around to knock on the doors of the surrounding buildings, and they wanted to know who lived where and who the owners of the buildings were and what they were doing. So if they found out your house was unoccupied and you were in Richmond supporting the Confederacy, well, the U.S. Army took your house over. But a lot of times, as they knocked on the door, what they discovered was the houses were being lived in by people that had been enslaved in the area and had come to Harpers Ferry for safety. And in some cases, they were living in buildings that were not even usable by the Army. The roofs had been burned out, and they'd had to rebuild and manufacture a new home out of the old walls that were laying there. And so they discovered that there are literally dozens of houses being occupied by formerly enslaved people or free blacks that had come into this area to work for the government or try to escape the Confederacy. By November, December 1864, it becomes a refugee problem of colossal levels, because as Sheridan leaves Harpers Ferry in August and September and moves south, he issues the orders burning out the valley. So then you end up with everyone coming here for safety. You have the farmers, the various pacifist sects of the valley. You have the free blacks, the self-liberated. There's no food. You have to come here. One man said the parties heading toward Harpers Ferry and Martinsburg were so large, the groups, that it looked like Army corps moving down the highways, and you could see the glow of their campfire for miles at night. The Army even went to the point of issuing old Army wagons to help haul people out. And so we know from various estimates that later in the war, Harpers Ferry had tens of thousands of formerly enslaved peoples and also, various refugees just trying to get away from the strife. They also had POWs. In the last 6 months of the war, Harpers Ferry processed over 21,000 Confederate prisoners of war. So there's a lot here, a lot going on here. And so this is an opportunity for people. And some people do stay after the war, and eventually they'll help populate and they'll help found and make function Storer College, which is on Camp Hill, when we're going to see that a little bit later. And so that leads to a whole different scenario being played out. So hopefully that answers your question there. It's a lot. It's a lot of people. It really is.
Absolutely. And, pictures like this, which, they don't show you a whole lot. I mean, when you look at this, you wouldn't think, 2,000 people are staying here. But
Yeah.
I think you're probably spot on with that. And it should also be noted that these numbers would be in pretty heavy flux.
Right. Right.
Some people would leave, some people would come. Not everyone, I would wager most people don't want this to be their primary living condition. So this is not a permanent place, but for many, it's the only place
Right.
that they have to go. So these numbers are constantly fluctuating. So it's entirely possible that maybe all of those numbers are correct.
Right. At one point or another, yes, absolutely.
That you listed. And so you also point us to, Jeff, what I think is a really important little tidbit is that sometimes, when you're trying to dig up information to study the past, you have to look certainly in unlikely places. You need to re-look at familiar sources and things. It's not an easy task to try and assemble all
that
this
number
information.
was hidden in that, and I had read that years ago, and I just didn't do the math, and then I realized, you know what, these are real people, and he's getting food for the captured soldiers, the people in the hospitals, the people that are in the town, and there's a lot more people here than we thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what conditions were like in these sort of camps. And in many ways, conditions, here in camps like this, contraband camps, well, for one, it's not a rosy picture, but that can be said of just about all camps during the Civil War. This could be said of Army camps. It certainly could be said of contraband camps. You can see they're all living incredibly close together. And regrettably, one of the lessons of the pandemic has been, that physical distancing is a key way to stop the spread of disease. And so living in such close quarters like this, disease is incredibly common in camps of this nature, and almost certainly would have been very, very common here. Regrettably, at the time of the Civil War, they also don't know about germ theory yet. So something like a mask, like Jeff and I are wearing here today, would not have been thought of really at all. So nothing of this nature is being done to prevent the spread of disease. Now, treatment in places like this would be pretty uneven if it could be acquired at all. And in many cases, those in camps like this would have to self-treat, acquiring medical care, the best that they can acquire themselves, or remedies that they happen to know, things of this nature. So the administration of medical care is very uneven if it can be acquired at all. So camps like these are, again, this goes throughout, really all Civil War camps, and contraband camps especially, are disease-ridden, fairly dirty. There are no cleanliness standards that are followed with any degree of consistency. So this gets to one of the statistics that we don't like sharing it, but it's a notable statistic. Is that 2/3 of all Civil War deaths come as a result of disease. And when you sit and think about conditions in places like this for any length of time, it's not hard to understand why that might be true. So disease is overwhelmingly a major problem in all camps during the Civil War. And this bears its ugly head in cities as well. President Lincoln's son Willie famously or infamously dies of typhoid fever because there's an outbreak in D.C. Another community that suffers heavily off of that same outbreak is there's a refugee camp, Contraband camp, in the D.C. area. Arlington, I believe, is where it is.
Yeah, the Freedman camp there.
Yes, yes. So disease is such a common problem in places like this, and really what sort of defines the experience. Living in homes and things, that eventually starts to become more common as the war progresses. That would lessen some of that problem, but it's certainly not completely going away, especially as the town gets more and more populous as 1864 goes on. So there's a lot to consider when thinking about this, and it's also tough, and Jeff, you sort of alluded to this actually in our previous stop. It's hard to get the voices of those who actually lived in these camps into the record because, in many cases, they didn't leave any written records, which is not the only, but a major way that we kind of access the historical record. Because they're so transient, someone that lived here for a time in Harpers Ferry may go on to die somewhere in Nebraska or something, and it's hard to connect those dots if that's where the records end up.
I think
and
I've
you're
only
out here.
seen one account from a man that was here in that time period in '62, and he eventually, out of fear of being recaptured or sent back to his former enslaver, he basically escaped the town. He ran through the pickets, and they fired on him, but he said he felt the man fired up in the air, realizing he was, escaping, and he wasn't a harm to the Union. So he got through and got a job up north, and was able to make good, was able to do very good for himself. Yeah.
So there's a lot of incredible work that is yet to be done. And we'll of course never be able to capture the full story. But I'm not saying that there isn't information out there that can be found. You just need to.
It's pretty rare.
To work hard to track it down, though. It's not easy. So we wanted to spotlight this experience certainly as it fits within the medical realm. We're going to talk a little bit more at one of our later stops about people from these camps and things they did in hospitals here in town. Anything else you want to add, Jeff?
No, I think we covered it. Yeah.
Any questions in the comments, Jake?
No questions, but we do have a comment that if you want to talk a little bit more about your conversation with Amy Morrell Taylor.
Oh, yes. Great question. Thank you for asking. Someone in the comments asking about my conversation about Amy Morrell Taylor. Another interview I did over the course of this past year. And I should also mention Chandra Manning's book. If you want to read more, people who are much more expert than Jeff and I in this particular subject, I'd recommend Chandra Manning's Troubled Refuge, which is what...
I just bought that a few weeks ago.
Oh, did you? Well, you're in for a real treat. Chandra Manning is a gem and really a fantastic writer and an incredible scholar, so and just a delightful person. So that's going to be a great read. And then the book that I spoke with Dr. Amy Morrell Taylor about was Embattled Freedom.
Okay.
And it covers a similar but slightly different, comes at it from a different angle. And if you want to get sort of the cliff notes of those, you can listen to the interviews I did. If you just go to our YouTube channel and you search Manning or Taylor, it should come up.
They're in the comments.
Oh, and Jake put them in the comments, so you can go link to those, watch a clip of that while we go between stops. So we're going to end it here for now. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get notified when we come back. Should be in the next 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes or so here. We head to our next stop. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back with you in just a little bit.